Excited to introduce the Teicherts, Jeff and Cathy. Their title of their presentation is Lift Up Thy Head. Jeff Teichert, am I saying that?
Yes. Yeah.
Is an Assistant Attorney General in the Constitutional Defense and Special Litigation Division of Utah's Attorney General's Office. Cathy Butler Teichert is a professional violinist with her string quartet, Strings of Excellence, and an advanced active Suzuki violin teacher with Cathy's Violin Studio. Jeff and Cathy are co-authors of Intentional Courtship, a Bit Singles Guide to Peace, Progress, and Pairing Up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They each spent nearly a decade in the mid-singles community and draw on this experience to provide counsel and hope to the reader. Together, they founded an organization called Love in Later Years, so the acronym LIVI, which ministers to Latter-day Saint mid-singles seeking peace, healing, and more joyful relationships. Jeff and Cathy are both advanced certified family life coaches, and they enjoy serving in that capacity and as inspirational podcasters and YouTubers. They are the parents of a blended family that includes 4 handsome sons, 1 lovely daughter-in-law, and most recently, a sweet baby granddaughter.
Thank you. You want to start?
Yeah, let's go to the first slide.
First slide.
So just a few of the things we coach on and have seen that weigh us down. We've experienced loss of marriage through divorce, through the death of a spouse, or we're not yet married, single, who they can feel lonely, they can feel isolated, and they can also feel like life is passing them by. We also can see that, you know, when meaningful relationships like friendships and other intimate relationships end, sometimes even family relationships have to end for these reason or another. That can be really painful and weigh us down. Disappointments within marriages that stay together. We talked a lot about last keynote session that it's ideal when marriages stay intact, but that doesn't mean everything's always easy. The death of a close friend or family member, which we've experienced quite a bit of in our own lives, income loss, job loss, financial stress, health scares, infertility, miscarriage. There's a lot of things that weigh us down in life.
Next slide. So this is something that I found kind of interesting, and we even write about it in our book, Intentional Courtship. But there have been a number of studies done of these functional MRIs. Cross and Bertram in 2011 is one of them, but there are a number. And they show that the pain we experience from rejection, a number of these look at the functional MRIs of people that have been recently divorced, and an unwanted divorce, that their brains light up in exactly the same places as people experiencing physical pain. And that isn't true of any other emotion. It's not true of depression, sadness, anger. And it's only when we're feeling rejected that
Which
we
they're
get
calling
that.
social distress here.
Right. That same, and because the social pain involves being rejected. Now, I think that has a broad survival function. In primitive times, if your tribe kicked you out, you were probably going to die. When you were a baby, you survived because somebody loved you. And so being rejected by your intimate partner is a very almost violent act in a way. And so that's when we talk to people who have been divorced, this is always something we keep in mind. People who have not been through this don't know, because you can't if you haven't experienced it. I went around for 4 years feeling like I'd been kicked in the stomach.
And I had this pain in my chest, so it got so bad one day, felt like it wasn't possible to physically survive that pain. And that was shortly after my own divorce, and both of us experienced unwanted divorces. So that was very rejecting.
Right. So And I mean, it actually physically hurts. It's not just, oh, I feel down. It's actually, no, I am in pain. And I was feeling it like right here, like I'd been kicked in the stomach. And I carried that around all day. I took it to bed every night. I woke up to it every morning. It was relentless.
And physical pain can weigh us down too.
Right.
Next slide.
Yeah. So, is there anyone here who's not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? I don't want to single anybody out or anything, but we're going to talk a little bit about the Book of Mormon. This shows Alma after he's been rejected in preaching in the city of Ammonihah, and
This is how a lot of clients feel when they come to us for coaching, or when they listen to our podcast or find our YouTube videos, and they want some peace in their lives.
yeah, the way that this is described in Alma 8, it came to pass that while he was journeying thither, he was leaving the city, being weighed down with sorrow, wading through much tribulation and anguish of soul. So these are very heavy words, very heavy thoughts. And if you notice the way the artist depicts this, his head's down, his shoulders are slumped, he is looking really defeated. So we can go to the next one. So I don't know, so Tony Robbins can be kind of controversial. He says when you change your physiology, you change your psychology. And he tells people, look up, square your shoulders, and you will feel stronger. You will have an immediate, and if you think about it, I mean, you just practice it right now if you want. Do this, slump your shoulders, look down. You feel weaker. If you sit up straight, lift up your head, well, you feel stronger.
And there's several TED Talks about this, and they call it power posture. And it's kind of like the Jolly Green Giant. And as a violinist and a teacher, it's a performance technique to play like this. Yeah, I could call it snotty, like my students are so sweet and so thoughtful. I'm like, I want you to look up. And it really helps them be more confident, even when they're just playing. I can tell a difference than when they're playing like here. Yeah, it's a big difference in their performance in any situation. And then we like to think of coaching as kind of being a symbiotic relationship between psychology and physiology, like what Tony Robbins is talking about, where we help elevate psychology by doing all of the growth mindset things and examining thoughts that might not be serving us and being able to come to new thoughts that are more supportive. And that helps us naturally look up. So it can be both ways, right? We can walk through the grocery store with our head up like I did the other day, even though I was feeling sad, and elevating myself through the physiology change.
You can go ahead. All right, so here Alma is receiving some great coaching by an angel that met him on his way, and I will read it from the book. It says that while he was thus weighed down with sorrow, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared unto him, saying, Blessed art thou, Alma, therefore lift up thy head and rejoice. For thou hast great cause to rejoice, for thou hast been faithful in keeping the commandments of God from the time thou receivest thy first message from him. We'll get into the second part of that in a minute, but you can see in the artist's depiction here, Alma's head is up, his shoulders are square, he's open to the truth he's receiving with his hands and arms. And the second part of this, I find interesting. Why was he feeling downcast before? It says in verse 13, now when the people had said this and withstood all his words and reviled him and spit upon him and caused that he should be cast out of their city, talk about rejection. and he was weighed down with sorrow because of the wickedness of the people of Ammonihah. He's focused at that point on what other people are doing. What does the angel tell him? He tells him to lift up his head and rejoice. Why? For thou hast great cause to rejoice, for thou hast been faithful in keeping the commandments of God. The angel's telling him, you focus on you. Focus on the things you have control over. Don't lament and sorrow and be weighed down by all the stuff you have no control over. Now he tells him, go back to the city.
So in other words, if he's looking down because of all the things he can't control, can't do anything about,
He's going to feel defeated.
and the angel's saying, look up anyway.
Right. And he's saying, you've been faithful. You did what you were asked. You went and preached in this city. And, the people didn't receive you. Well, that's on them. So a big part of it is focusing on what we can control. You can go to the next slide. We like the serenity prayer for this same point. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Doesn't mean we like it, but it means that we accept it, acknowledge it, surrender to the fact that that's the way it is. Courage to change the things we can change. And we can lift up our head, we can rejoice in the things we're trying to do to be helpful, and having the wisdom to know the difference.
Thinking maybe we could stay a minute on this slide, because we were making sure that we didn't rush you or not make it so you don't have a break class. But I think we could maybe have a little time to get some like.
Yeah, well, I would like to say when Alma received the message from the angel, it says he returned speedily unto the land of Ammonihah. So he's just been rejected there, spit on, reviled, the whole thing. And the angel tells him to go back. By the way, if you know the story, they didn't accept him any better the second time. But that wasn't Alma's problem. Alma was.
He had been informed by the angel not to worry about their response that he could.
Right. So how does this apply in divorce? Even the loss of a beloved family member to death. Something we've unfortunately recently experienced. My son, my 24-year-old son, died about a month ago, a little over that. Serenity to accept the things I cannot change. Well, that's a tough one. And my mind wants to go all the time to try and find a way out. But
What if?
Yeah, what if we've done this different? Yeah, so the serenity is to accept that he's gone. And that for the rest of this life, that's the way it's going to be.
Well, it was a little bit, I don't know if you thought of this, but during that poem in the last of the keynote, he fell off.
That's true.
And we wish he would have taken prevention.
Yeah. Now, we do have a certain amount of serenity in the fact that he was in a good place emotionally, spiritually. He had been inactive in the church for most of his adult life, but was in the last couple of years coming back to that. My other son cleaned out his room, and no evidence of any illegal substances or problems with that. And on the nightstand next to his bed were his scriptures. So he had changed a lot. And there's some comfort even in those things we can't change about it.
Well, and they were marked in D&C 76, which is about the afterlife. And we were told about a week later, after we discovered this, that he'd been talking to one of his friends about wanting to know more about what happens when we die. And then just a couple days ago, I noticed that I have very few markers in my scriptures, and one of those few were in the same I don't remember when I was reading that, but for whatever reason that, I don't know, just lots of special little tender mercies and synchronicities. And we've had hundreds, even thousands of people reach out. And one that I was remembering particularly with this piece, Can Be Restored, where she said that she lost her daughter 6 months ago. And she said she got a blessing, a priesthood blessing, from leaders in her church, and it said that she would be filled with peace. And she said that it's like washed over her in that moment. And from then on, she just felt protected. Now, that doesn't mean like she doesn't bawl her eyes out when she goes to finally get her oil change and gets chastised by the technicians for not doing it when her daughter had died and, putting it off. Because it doesn't mean isn't hard, but she said it washed over her. And when I read that, I was thinking, well, Jeff's got 2 blessings, and they all said that they just talked about strength. I'm like, I don't need that. Like, he's been really strong. But we like peace. And I think some of that has started washing over me, I think, since I read that. Sometimes we just need to know it's possible. Sometimes we just need to be reminded that it's happened before and it will happen again, and that peace is available. And it's actually, we spend 8 chapters in this book on reestablishing peace in your life when you've lost a relationship.
Well, a lot of people will experience a divorce or the death of a spouse or the death of a child or, a major loss once in life, and it changes their perspective forever after that. Depending on how you look at it, I've had 4. The first was when I was 26 years old, and my youngest brother, who was 17, died of cancer.
And I share something very similar where when I was 27 and I just had my first baby, was 6 months old, my sister died of a sudden traumatic brain injury.
Now, I can tell you, even with this acceptance, and we talk a lot about radical acceptance, that the previous speaker talked about celiac disease. I got the same diagnosis. And
after a year of not knowing.
Yeah, for a moment, I was a little angry when I was realizing what this was going to mean. And then I thought, well, diabetics do this kind of stuff all the time. They have to restrict their diet. Some of them have to take shots. This is a medical condition I have, and I can either fight it or I can deal with it. I walked out of the doctor's office that day and never ate gluten again anyway.
He didn't join support groups or anything like that. He just radically accepted it. Now, I recently got diagnosed with another autoimmune disease, and I had symptoms for like 3 years without the accurate diagnosis that I needed. And I got really mad because I used to think that any kind of food restriction would be the worst thing in the world, including like the gluten-free thing he's been doing like the whole time I've known him. And now it's not just gluten, it's dairy, it's soy, it's all high FODMAP foods, which is like half of all fruits and vegetables and all beans. So, and that's my new diet. And I'm accepting it now, but I went kicking and screaming. But we haven't found that when we divorce, something that's a death, something that's we can try to wish it away or wish it were different or think it's unfair, because none of those things are really helpful.
When I think back to the death of my little brother, there are certain moments, even now, 29 years later, when I can get choked up thinking about him or talking about him. He's been gone quite a lot longer than he was here. I don't expect that ever to change. I don't expect it to change with my son, because that's an even deeper loss in many ways. And so I think part of the acceptance is accepting, you know what, you're never going to get over this. You're going to get through it. You're going to get used to it.
Peace can be restored.
You're going to learn to live with it. You're going to have peace. You're going to have happiness again. You're going to be your old self. But you're always going to have that little wound in your heart. C.S. Lewis talked about it in his book, A Grief Observed, as like somebody having a limb amputated. Says, you know, that wound from the amputation might heal, but they're still without their hand or whatever it is they're missing, and that's still going to hurt. And we talk to a lot of people who are divorced, widowed, and otherwise, and
Otherwise single and missing a partner
right.
they want in life.
And there are a lot of thoughts that are really unsupportive. Like, if my spouse had only been this way or that way, if they had only not left the church, or if they had only been calmer, or, you know, go down the list. This wasn't the way it was supposed to turn out. You know, my life wasn't supposed to be this way.
And we've learned actually that the straight and narrow is spelled differently than what you think of as a straight line. But the straight that it means in scripture is actually a narrow passageway through danger. A narrow passageway through danger that can be very windy and very treacherous, actually. And that is the way life is actually meant to be. That's our life. You know, we went off on a wonderful tangent, but you were going to say 4 things. 1, the death of your brother.
Well, and then a divorce from my wife of more than a decade and a half. A divorce I didn't want. I remarried 5 years later, and the marriage lasted 6 months.
And Jeff and I also share that. About 1.5 years after my divorce, I remarried, and that lasted 1.5 years after my 14-year marriage had ended. And we both chose those divorces because they were abusive and toxic. That was hard. That was a hard choice. And that's something else we've decided is like how to choose. Like no one ever talks about how to decide if you're in a relationship that can be healthy and progress you in this life. Now, do we champion or promote divorce? I mean, like our kids say, no. We just support it once it's happened.
Sometimes you have to decide to divorce because you have to accept that your partner is not going to change, and that what they're dealing with is a deal breaker issue if they're abusive in some way or whatever.
Well, and then we're dealing with prevention here.
The courage could be the things that I can do to make my marriage better.
And we do all of those things before ever like deciding on divorce.
And we have to have the wisdom to know what we can change and what we can't. And obviously one of the things we can't change is another person's decisions. We can try to persuade, we can talk, but at the end of the day, God honors agency pretty much above everything else. And I've often played through this kind of funny scenario in my head that, let's suppose me and my former wife went before the judgment bar of God, and God said, Jeff, do you want to be with her? And I said, yes. And well, Julia, do you want to be with him? No, I don't. And I make my case then to God. Well, she promised, she made covenants. She said she'd be with me through eternity. She said she would love me. So what about all that? Imagine God sits back and says, it's a good point. Yep, you've got to be with him. Do I want her under those terms? Even if that's what God would do, which is absurd, but
because it doesn't honor agency. And we're big fans of Dr.
The nice and high.
No? Well, yes, but
Greg Bear.
Greg Bear. Yeah, so Dr. Greg Bear wrote the book Real Love and a whole bunch of real love books. And we were blessed to have him on our podcast, Lily Pod, recently. And it was a great interview. It was like, I don't know, it's like meeting your hero, right? Because it was a book that Jeff really struggled with and hated until he realized it was all true. That honoring agency means you completely honor the choices of other people. And a lot of his principles, along with Jennifer Finlayson Fife and a lot of other authorities on subjects that matter in this realm, are in the book, as well as, we talked about preventative versus reparative work. And so it's the reparative work we do with accepting things we cannot change is knowing really clearly in advance of marrying someone what 3 to 5 things are the absolute most important deal breakers, and then find someone who fits that and only date people who fit that. And you're a lot more likely to have success with that person if you know that everything else is negotiable, everything else you can do, and you know it in advance.
If you think about this, there are a couple of observations really quick on divorce. If I believe it wasn't supposed to be this way, the plan of God has been thwarted in some way, I've lost my exaltation, go down the list of things that we sometimes say. And I think there's even kind of an implied cultural assumption in the church that if somebody's divorced and remarried, well, good for them. They made the best of a bad situation. And we're okay with that as long as it's still a bad situation. And maybe you have a path through life that is not conventional. And maybe part of that is accepting certain things that you have no power to control. Maybe love not freely given is not real, and your spouse, for whatever reason, chooses out. Well, I think if we're stuck in this mindset of this isn't the way it was supposed to be, instead of maybe this was my path, it's going to prevent us from finding the beautiful life that I think God wants us to live. And, I think about the relationship we have, and it's just so much better and greater than anything else I've had.
And a lot of the reason is because we had that growth mindset. We questioned our beliefs. We questioned how we were showing up in relationships, and we made the necessary changes. And then we continue to do that together.
We decided, because we've got statistically a 73% chance of getting divorced.
Which means 27%.
7% is to be very intentional about your relationship.
And intentional courtship, intentional marriage.
And so part of
There
that
is confidence in accepting things we can't change, because then we're not weighed down with what we have. And when we have the courage to change the things we can, we're moving, we're progressing, we're going somewhere with it.
Yeah.
That clock is also 3 minutes.
Okay. I would also suggest that Alma went back to the city of Ammonihah. Although the people rejected him, he did find something. He found his companion, Amulek. And sometimes God has things in mind for us that we don't necessarily understand. And I think that's one of the hopeful things about looking up to heaven rather than looking down to hell.
Speaking of which, actually my scriptures are in there. Can somebody hand them to me? So just at that deeper bag, yeah. Just tiny little scriptures with tiny little words. So that's how I do it. Probably don't want me to throw them. Thank you so much. Right. So I made this decision for myself. And this conference is all about integrating spirituality and into families and into ourselves. And I made this decision. I'll admit, I made it actually 6 months or so ago, maybe a year ago, that I would not touch my phone, because I'm like a big fan of touching my phone. I mean, we pretty much like throw out a new piece of resource almost every day to like share the love, right? And it gets like, it overwhelms my day, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna spend some time with God first. So I started putting this on top of my phone, and then it kind of, and then I kind of forgot. I don't know why. I fell out of the habit or something, but I got in a good habit for a few weeks. This time I'm more committed because I've learned a little bit more through like coaching, training, things like that about the difference between a want and a commitment. Okay, so this is like a commitment, and I've been doing a commitment to go to the gym twice a week for what, a couple months, and I've been totally consistent, even when I don't feel like it, even when it's like 11 o'clock Saturday night and I need my second one and I go before I go to bed. Anyway, on top of my phone. And this morning I was thinking, well, we got to wake up at 5, we got to leave by 5:45 to get to Provo for a dental appointment by 7. Like, it's not going to happen. So last night when I fell asleep, I set this intention. I prayed that I just get up 5 minutes or before my alarm, mostly just so that I would. Great. I woke up at 4:30. Scripture time. So I went and like on my phone, and then I was like opened them up, and I was thinking I was in a hurry, so I was like, and I was down. I was looking down, and this is so dumb because I'm doing a speech, so I'm looking up. My neck kind of hurt. I'm like, well, I need to find a better way to put scriptures on my But anyway, but it needs to find, which I think naturally elevates our confidence and gives us better physiology moving forward, maybe not while we're doing it. I think it's also a good idea actually to raise too, like, so you're always looking up. I mean, because I'm a violinist and I've had back issues, I like to make sure I'm really careful about that. But one thing, actually, I think I kind of had an idea come to me this morning about this, because I've been reading about, I just wanted to show you guys. So 76, you can see 76, that's where this was. And then I decided that because I was in Alma, like, instead of starting at First Nephi, which we've read a million times, I just decided to start right from the middle in Alma where I was. And I'm reading about temporal death and the resurrection through the Savior. And then I saw a post on Facebook from a friend who's struggling with her spirituality and her faith, and then I read the next morning about spiritual death. It made me so sad. So like, we've lost Jeff's young son to death and recently, and it's sad. But like, when I read about spiritual death, I was like, that's in so many ways so much worse, because what we lose is we lose our access to truth when we start, I think, kind of like what our keynote speaker alluded to, when we start believing in false dichotomies and we don't look beyond that for the truth. And I also love that he said the devil's in the details, the devil and truth is the detail. And I think when we're open to truth, we're less likely to experience that spiritual death. And when we make it a priority, we're a lot more likely to include the spirit in our everyday lives and in our families. And when I put here that new connections become compensatory blessings, that little icon up there, that's in the third section of our book. The second and third section of this book, after establishing peace, is all about making progress in the dating world and pairing up with your eternal companion. And if you can see those two little happy butterflies on the heart, it's the symbol of new connections becoming what we call compensatory blessings.
If we think about, you probably all this year heard more than once about the story of Joseph, who was sold into Egypt. And, first gets sold as a slave and then goes to prison, and then through an improbable series of events, essentially becomes prime minister of the country and saves many, many lives. And amazing story. But he recognizes in the end, when he greets his brothers, that he says, it was not you that sent me here, but God. He recognizes the hand of God in all of the adversity that he has faced.
And a lot of people find like that their favorite thing about our story is that we are with each other and we found each other and we're doing what we're doing because we lost something we loved that we thought we wanted that we didn't want to change.
And we suggest,
And aren't we grateful now?
absolutely,
But that
because
didn't mean it didn't take years of being isolated alone and not knowing how it would turn out and having to kind of envision what we wanted in order to create what we have now.
I mean, ultimately, every loss we experience makes space for something else. And, you know, if I hadn't gone through that divorce, which was very painful, one of the most painful experiences of my life, I wouldn't have Cathy. I wouldn't have her 2 kids as my stepkids. I'm not suggesting that people go out and get divorced.
Oh no, we wouldn't wish that on anyone. It's not easy.
Right.
You know, I think it would be good to just mention here that because you had that gut ache for 4 years, that's partly because he was looking down with his thoughts and with his physiology. And because now
Absolutely. That's what it would have happened no matter what, but it lasted that long because I was hanging on.
yes, it would have happened, but it
beliefs.
might have been a week rather than 4 years, maybe
Probably more.
6 months. I'm thinking is taxing a short time, and then of course it takes a long time. There's no easy way about that, but it's easier when you have radical acceptance.
When you focus on what you can control. Now, if any of you have ever talked to somebody who's recently been through a divorce, what do they want to talk about? My ex-husband did this and this and this, and he, you know, I saw him with this woman at a restaurant. I mean, you whatever. You go down this litany of things that their spouse did that ruined their life.
And
that,
although we do think you need to talk about your story, eventually it needs to morph into something more productive and eventually become other things you talk about. And one thing I've noticed with Jeff now that we're, you know, we are coaches and a lot of our coaching is on grief and we're experiencing one of the biggest tragedies of his life. He took 2 weeks off work. He takes an hour every day to mourn the loss of his son, but he's otherwise at work. He's showing up to these events. We're still doing our podcasts and our videos, and like we haven't stopped.
if you wallow for 4 years, it really can send your life spinning. And I had problems with unemployment, underemployment, all sorts of stuff during that time because I was spending all my time grieving.
But you're responding with strength this time.
And
Lifted head.
right, and I think having gone through grief before, fortunately or unfortunately, as however you want to look at that, I have a better idea of what the destination is, what healing looks like.
And we're so grateful that we have a Savior to show us how to live it and gives us a reason to. Let's do the next slide. And this is our last slide. And we'd encourage you to take a picture of it real quick. Because this is how to follow us. I know that's a lot of words, but really, if you want to just take a picture real quick, and then we're just going to actually send this around. Do I have a pen? I think there's one on the side of my purse. So on the left side, or left. Zip. Oh, it's just right. Sorry. Okay, so sorry. Do you guys listen to podcasts? If you listen to podcasts, go to your favorite app and look for Lily Pod 2 word. And then if you want to sign up for our, it's a weekly Lily letter. It's only 3 paragraphs and it's always uplifting and it always has a link to our current podcast and video. Yeah, there are people really like those. Also, if you have the YouTube app, you can go there and you can either find us through LilyTube or Love in Later Years. Anyway, and then our website is the one place to remember if nothing else. loveinlateryears.com has like kind of access to everything, our coaching, and also Lily Gems. So all of the articles Jeff writes for Meridian Magazine and on our social media pages ends up in our archives and they can be searched by topic. So you can go to our website and find lots of good, helpful information. Also, if you or anyone you know is interested in life coaching, We do have a few openings for our private coaching spots, and we also have some room in our established Lily Men's group. It's actually Knights of the Lily Roundtable and our Lily Ladies group, which is amazing. Like I've gathered some of the most growth mindset women in this group, and they're so kind and so loving towards one another. And anyway, we just really love our groups and our coaching practice, and we appreciate that you're here. Do you
Also, if anyone wants
oh yes,
to buy a copy of our book, we have a few with us. So,
they make great Christmas presents for, I'm sure you all know someone who's recently divorced or widowed or single and wants to be married. This is fabulous.
we bear testimony that life can be beautiful even after divorce or the death of a loved one, that you can heal. You'll always carry a certain amount of that grief with you, but you can heal. You can become happy again. You can become your old self. And you can build a life that's more beautiful than you had before. And we testify of that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.